Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magic is Real. I'm Shannon Torrance. I am your host. This is the podcast where we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual with a focus on near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences, including spiritual healing. If you like this podcast, would you do me a big favor? That's really a little favor. Would you mind just liking this video and leaving a comment underneath it, even if it's just a little emoji? It helps the algorithm by making sure that the podcast goes out to more people and finds the people who would appreciate this content. Thank you so much for your support. Today, I am happy to have with me Ellie Pichette. I'm going to tell you about Ellie. She is a metaphysician, a shaman, a medium, and author. She is the owner of Phoenix Rising, intuitive counseling and energy healing, which specializes in remote healing and spiritual wellness. She is the author of several books, which we will talk about as well. I would just like to welcome Ellie as we talk about a variety of topics, including her spiritual awakening and awareness, with a focus, though, today on grief healing, which I'm very much looking forward to speaking about, because on Magic is Real, we tend to talk a lot about the magic of the spirit world and what an exciting awareness that can be. There is a lot to be excited about in the what people call supernatural realm, which I call it's just the natural realm. And also, we do have to acknowledge that with death comes grief. And Ellie is Ellie works with people on healing grief and other emotional issues. I'd like to have her explain in her own words what she does. But first, let's just welcome her. Ellie, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today.
Well, you're welcome, Shannon. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Ellie, I would love to hear, let's start with the work that you do, because I'd like for you to explain in your own words what it is exactly that you do with and for clients.
I free them from the bondage of the past, whether it's childhood issues, which is where most things stem from. In fact, my most recent newsletter, the June newsletter, focused on seeing, interpreting life experiences and relationships through the lens of the past. And so it's unconscious. People don't realize that they're doing it, but they do wonder, why they keep getting into destructive, unhealthy relationships, or why they're not able to manifest what they think on some level that they deserve and should be able to manifest. And, often these issues have their root in childhood, whether they had a parent who was very unsuccessful financially and couldn't get out of his own way, or they might have grown up with parents that were always, fighting, shouting. And so unconsciously that resonates for them. People are always reading each other's body language and what's below the surface. And so, they will resonate with a person who they're going to end up fighting with the way they witnessed their parents. So what I do is I work with the unconscious, and every session I clear whatever the highest priority is for that session, whether it's, a parent who is abusive or neglectful and caused the child, now the adult, to feel unworthy and undeserving. I'll clear something, I call them core issues, and I'll clear whatever the biggest core issue is every session. And every time I clear a heavy root issue like that, the client feels lighter, more free, and more empowered. And that's really what my my mission is to help people, free them from the past so that they can step into, their empowerment, their genuine empowerment, and what it is that they're here to do this lifetime, what it is that they're here to, how they're here to make their contribution through their gifts and natural abilities. And I love it. I really do.
Great. When you talk about clearing that energy, I've heard you speak about it on other podcasts and seen on your website that you spoke about it as well. How do we clear energy, or how do you clear energy for other people? What is energy?
Yeah, I have a very unique ability that I've been told by several that there are only like 9 or 10 people in the world that can do what I do energetically. It's a vibration that I came in with. I've been a healer and of service, offering my healing in many lifetimes. And so this life, I came in really as a master healer energetically. And as far as my vibration, my level of consciousness. And so all I had to do was, you know, um, take a few, uh, get certified in a few energy healing techniques to help me remember what I already knew but had forgotten until I got here, if that makes sense, right? And then once I got certified in those techniques over the years, I actually stepped into my full natural ability, which is to send healing energy in a way that literally dissolves whatever the issue is that is the focus for that session. So it's really not a head thing. It's really a vibration um, thing, for lack of a better word, and the ability to send the healing energy like a laser going in. You don't hear of people, other practitioners, talking about being able to dissolve whatever the issue is, but that's literally what I do.
Great. Now, how did you discover that you had these abilities? I'd love for you to take us back to as far back as you want to go. How
Yeah.
did you know? How did you know, and what led you into
I
this work?
didn't know. I didn't know when I was growing up. And, as a natural born shaman, shamans tend to have um, huge challenges, much bigger than the average person. And so I grew up in a very, very toxic, destructive, dark family. And I had to go through what I went through with them. It's kind of like walking through fire and getting to the other side, and being more empowered and really in alignment. Once I've gotten to the other side. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. I think maybe not every healer has had a traumatic background. However, it is everybody experiences trauma to some degree or another. Life is traumatic. Every single human being at one point in their life is going to experience something traumatic. Some quote unquote worse than others. They say big T, little t, not to quantify people's trauma. But if we hadn't gone through the things that we had gone through, how would we know empathy? How would
Right.
we know how we healed? Which doesn't mean it's the right way for everyone, but I know in my experience, my certain set of challenges led me into the work that I do now, which is mediumship, writing a book for which is I'm almost finished with, to help people recover from sex and love addiction, finding self love. But how would I know that if I hadn't been through hell and my own personal hell and back?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
And
yeah,
that's, like you said, going through painful experiences really, it's the best way to teach us compassion for those who we're supposed to help.
exactly.
So once we're past it, we can be grateful for it. It's hard going through it when you're in the middle of it. right? But once you get past that point and you're left with the jewels of the clarity and the understanding and the compassion, then it's a big hooray, right?
Exactly. Now, I have a question about energy healing that I think many people might ask, which is, since we come here, it is my understanding, since we come here to learn certain lessons and our souls choose some of our difficulties in order that we may learn from them,
Exactly right. Yes.
how is energy healing not interfering with that process? Does that
That's a
make sense?
wonderful
Yeah.
question. Beautiful. I love that.
If we can just clear it out, then why do we have to go through? Then what are we learning, right? So I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Usually by the time clients find me, they've suffered often for most of their life, most of their life. And there's no reason to perpetuate the suffering. What I specialize in is clearing the charge, the wound, the trauma, all of the negative feelings associated with experiences and particular relationships so that the charge is gone, but the wisdom remains. And part of what takes place in the sessions is helping them have clarity and understand, what the lesson was. So once a person gets the lesson, they have that wisdom. Their soul has developed and grown, and without the suffering. Does that help?
Right. Yeah, very much. I think a charge is the perfect word because I've even written in my book that recovery doesn't mean you're healed. Recovery means you're healing, you're learning, you're growing, you're learning new tools, you're learning self-care, you're learning how to cope better, and some of that wiring still remains. So at the end of my book, I'm not going to say, "Oh, I'm so perfectly healed and now I have this picket fence relationship and everything's great and I don't have those issues at all anymore." Or, if I have blocks around certain issues, I still have to work on them. It's still, I've done a lot of healing. I'm very grateful for the healing. And there's still, I keep saying, I think I might need EMDR to really kind of like, or what you do, right? To preferably to then finally just say, okay, I've done 15 years I'm very self aware. I know why I
Mm-hmm.
do these things. I know exactly why. But the wiring is still there. The triggers are still there. The
Right.
responses are still there. And that's where you would come in.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So that you could look at the things that might still have some remnants of triggers currently. You could look at those things if I worked with you and know that you are complete. It's finished.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you do a session with a client, I know that you have created your own healing method. And I think it's the Pichette healing technique.
Technique, yes.
Okay. Uh,
That's right.
and can you share a bit about what that entails?
Well, it's what we have been talking about, which is literally dissolving a core issue from the client, from their background every session. So it makes the work really more efficient and more effective than pretty much anything else out there. And what's good about it is that most issues only take one session. So it's extremely efficient and the results last. They don't have to the sessions don't have to be repeated. Say I clear abusive father, for a client who was abused by their father. Uh, that only needs to be done once and they'll feel a huge lightening of their spirit and in their entire being just from that one session, and they're at peace. So compared to feeling tortured, uh, with memories and recalling, abusive moments, like that all stops.
Yeah. You've shared some I know that you've shared some success stories with permission on your website. So, uh, this is obviously with respect to client confidentiality. Would you mind sharing an anecdotal kind of story about a way in which this type of healing that you've done has really turned things around for somebody, or even for yourself, even a personal story, whatever you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, there was a client that I worked with recently whose father actually was really abusive. He would, hit her, and he would yell at her and criticize her. And, for young children, they're so, as you know, they're so open and vulnerable to imprints, emotional imprints, verbal imprints, physical abuse imprints, and whatever it is. Uh, and this woman had been, like I said, hit by her father, criticized by him, and she was deeply imprinted. So when she found me, and I think it was from watching one of the podcast interviews, um, that was one of the sessions that I did for her. One of the issues was, and actually it was in her first session, I cleared abusive father. And from, feeling upset and anxious and um, just triggered by him, by the end of the session, she actually was laughing. She was actually laughing at him, and saw him as a joke.
Mhm.
So that was just her response, which is much healthier than the way she had been feeling about him and how it had been controlling a good part of her whole life for 40 plus years. So that's one
Yeah.
example.
Because
Yeah.
there's no closure when it comes to people who are mentally ill or abusive or unreasonable. You're never
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, you'll never get that person to say, I see the error of my ways. I understand what I did was wrong. I'm sorry. That's beautiful if that happens. But when you don't have closure with another person, unfortunately, you have to figure out a way to come to peace with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really difficult to do. It's how do we
Yes.
forgive not for their sake, but for our own sake so that we can find peace.
That's right. That's what forgiveness is. It's not about doing something for the other person. It's about doing something for ourselves, which is giving ourselves freedom from the angst, the obsession, the triggers, the preoccupation. That's what true forgiveness is. And well, I'll give you another example. A woman that I worked with was pretty badly abused by her mother, and the mother took her and her two younger brothers outside one day, and she had a shotgun, and she said she was going to kill all of them, and she didn't. um, by the grace of divine intervention, but the client never trusted her mother after that. And which makes perfect sense. And yet she carried the trauma of that incident with her whole life until she came to me for a few sessions. And by the end of the session, and this often happens in sessions with clients, she actually shifted from feeling extremely victimized and traumatized to expressing compassion for her mother and what she was going through. That's real healing.
Yeah. Hurt people, and you can logically know that. And if that something like that happens to you and it's so extremely traumatic, I understand it can be difficult. to stand in that person's shoes and acknowledge that they too were hurt and traumatized. That's why they are behaving this way.
Yes.
And you can also understand they wouldn't have behaved this way had they not been hurt by someone else.
Right.
And that's
Yes.
unfortunately a legacy and sometimes a very difficult cycle to break.
Yes. Exactly right. Yeah.
When we come into this life, what's your understanding of that, how we choose what the themes are going to be? Are they always related to past lives? Are they a new thing that our soul thinks, oh, how about we work on this particular thing? Just in general, I'd love to hear what you think about past lives, past experiences, and karma, not in the sense of you do something bad, you get something bad, which is sort of the skewed version of what karma means in American culture, versus karma being a theme that may come up again and again.
That is a really wonderful, juicy topic to talk about. I love that, Shannon. Um, so my sense is that we all have sacred contracts that we agree to when we're on the other side before we incarnate. Uh, and the purpose of the contract is, yes, for us to agree to go through the majority of what we go through this next lifetime to learn specific lessons that will help expand our soul. Now, I have helped a lot of mostly women, but some men too, who were victimized and came to me for help with the trauma from those experiences. You don't hear people talking about this much, but often my understanding has been that the reason for some of them, not all, but for some of them, they agreed to experience being victimized by a perpetrator. And it doesn't have to be just abuse, it could be any type of abuse. But for the sake of this example, when I would tune in and ask, some of them had been on the other side of things in a past life where they were the perpetrator and agreed to come in to this life in order to go through the experience so that they could experience being a victim as well as having been the victimizer. And what that does, it's painful, of course, and but it grows the and develops the soul to have both perspectives. And I think that's a big part of the lessons that we agreed to go through, is to have both perspectives of being victim and victimizer. Or, I mean, I can give you an example about myself, a personal example, because I love exploring my past lives. And, I think there's just a lot of really good information there where we can learn more about ourselves more deeply. I was the I was the wife of a slave owner in one of my past lives, and in that life, I was raped by a group of slaves and ended up with an injury to my pelvis and my hip that I brought into this life. And that's how I found out about that life, is because I've had a hip issue for a long time. And that's what that's what it's connected to, was that event. Um, so I was also, I was also a slave myself in two lifetimes. One as a male slave and one as a female slave. And when I was, in the life where I was a female slave, I was always spoken down to and called girl, girl do this, girl do that. And in this life, I've always resented any time that I was called as a girl. Anytime that I was called a girl, as an adult, it has always felt demeaning to me. And even other women being called girls, it feels like a way to, to put them down and make males feel superior because, as you know, there's this whole like brotherhood and man this and man that, and they love that word man. But when it comes to women, they often like to call women girls. So what does that do? It creates a power differential, right? A man is an adult, a girl is a child. So it creates a double standard and reinforces um, misogyny. Not to go into that now, but I just wanted to give you an example of a lot of the things that we go through and that we experience in this life do have uh, their origins in one or more past lifetimes. So the fact that I was a slave in two lifetimes and then I was the wife of a slave owner and was raped, you see how that kind of balances out uh, the experience, having the experience of both extremes.
And I actually relate with that. I have reason to believe that I also was an enslaved woman. I do not like to be told what to do at all. Not in an egotistical, arrogant way. I am compliant. I am responsible. I am not combative. I'm not even assertive. But I have a real thing about feeling controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not come from my parents. That does not, my parents are wonderful and loving and supportive. I have had regressions. I feel very connected when I've been to historical sites in Virginia where I'm partly from. And I know that obviously no one likes to be controlled and nobody would like to be a slave, but there's a very strong, adamant, do not tell me what to do. Do not control me. Do not.
Yes.
So I'm very hyper independent and, even didn't want kids, didn't just, nobody need anything from me, nobody ask anything of me. I will do what I want to do. And I see that theme in my own life. And I've also been told by other practitioners that I had a lot of children. I took care of a lot of people. I and I am very, very nurturing. I'm a nanny. Like I've always
Yeah.
taken care of children, but in a way that I have control over, where I'm being paid to take care of your child and I will give it
Yeah.
I have so much love to give, but I do not want I do not want someone else in my space. And I do connect that with my past lives and see how it all connects, which I think is very interesting. Now, when
It
you
is.
talked about having separate lives as slaves, now, two things. Obviously, enslavement has happened since the dawn of time. So this could be in any time period. But what I also wonder is, did you have two separate lifetimes in, for example, the, in the same time frame? Because what I know, what I believe, is that reincarnation doesn't have to be linear. So everything's happening everywhere all at once. So you can actually be living, actually, I believe we are living all of our timelines simultaneously. So you could literally have been an African slave in America, in colonial America, twice. Or do you, in your past life experience, has it been different time periods in different countries and different lands and different centuries?
Oh, I wouldn't say different centuries. I think both of those lives were probably within 100 years, give or take.
Yeah.
Uh, but you just reminded me that I did have a life in Africa, and I was the one that was chosen to kill animals for food because of my extreme love and compassion for them. So it was extremely difficult. I've always been a huge animal lover, and I say life is life is life. One is not superior or more valuable than the other, whether it's a human or an animal. And so, even though it was extremely difficult for me to have to kill them, I understood it. I understand it now, why I was picked, and I think it's better that it was me than someone with less compassion.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And let's what I really would love to talk about is your work with people that are in grief. So grief is a part of loving. Loss can be grief can be the loss of a job you loved. It could be the loss of a chapter in your life. It could be the loss of a person, which is usually what we associate it with. So let's get into your work with grief and how you help people heal from grief and what does that mean? Because I know that it goes deeper than I can heal grief in two, I think, a session or two, because what does that really mean? And I think people might see that and be resistant to the idea of there's no healing grief. You carry it with you always. You've lost your best
Mm-mm.
friend, you've lost your child, you've lost your spouse. So I'd
Nope.
love to hear how you express this.
Beautiful. No, I'd love to share about it. You know, there are so many grief circles and support groups and therapy and blah blah blah, on and on and on for months and years. And the people who are grieving a significant loss, they just keep going through the same thing, talking about it over and over and over. And what does that do? It keeps them in the grief. It's actually counterproductive. They might feel like they have support, say they go to a grief circle, but even though they feel some support during that circle, it really doesn't do anything to lift the grief. And if anything, hearing about other people's stories, difficult stories, is depressing, don't you think?
I hear that from a lot of grieving people that they don't want to go to a grief
Exactly.
support because they can't hear about other people's loss on top of their
Suffering.
own. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So my point is that, and yes, I literally heal grief in 2 sessions, sometimes often in one. And it alleviates the person who's been grieving, often for years, it alleviates their suffering. My mission, my whole purpose really for being here is to alleviate people's suffering and bring them into a place of inner peace. And when it comes to grief that we're speaking about, one of the reasons that people think that they should be grieving is because they're afraid they're going to feel guilty if they stop grieving the person that they loved and lost. But how about replacing the grief with loving, beautiful memories and and peace about the person that they lost rather than the perpetual suffering? Doesn't that make more sense?
Ideally,
No, that's what I do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
That's literally what I do is bring people from suffering to serenity and peace. And some of the video testimonials on my website, phoenixrisinghealing.com, they speak to that. One woman that met me at a conference, and signed up for some sessions after. In her first session, the main reason she came to me was because she had been suffering for 7 years. Her name is Paige, because her young adult son had been killed his first year in college. 7 years. She could not live her life. She couldn't function. And that's not what we're here for, to keep suffering. We're here to to grieve, go through the experience, and then shift. And what I do is I help people shift. So in her first session, uh, I healed her grief about losing her son. And by the end of it, and she says this on the video testimonial on the website, by the end of it, she said, I can look at, I think his name was Brian now, and I feel at peace. I know he's in a good place. And after that session, after healing her grief about her son, she literally got back into the game of life, was able to, start traveling and doing all the normal functions of her life. And she moved into her life's mission after that. So I cleared other issues, like a troubling relationship with her sister and a few other things that she'd been carrying. But healing the grief for her was the biggest priority, which is why I started with that.
Yeah, it's healing the pain of the
Yeah,
grief because you're always going to miss that person.
yeah,
And I know that, obviously we all know people that have gone through horrible loss, or I've been very fortunate that at middle age I've lost friends, I've lost grandparents, but nobody that I couldn't function without, nobody that was my lover, my
yeah.
partner, my
Hmm.
child, my sister, and but I do know that there would be people that would definitely feel angry about that. What would you say to someone like that who's like, because I hear it, you don't, it's never going to go away. It's never getting better. I just learned to manage the grief. I learned to live alongside it. Yeah.
No, no, no. There's a lot more that can be done. People don't have to, when I work with them, they don't have to manage the grief, because it's done. When someone is at peace, that's kind of the opposite of being in a place of grief, right?
I would just love to hear about kind of your awakening to that when you became aware that you had this ability, as we all do. But if you did work to hone it, if it came naturally, anything you want to share about that, because it's such a fascinating topic,
It
I
is
think.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And I loved what you said in the beginning about the what people call the supernatural is actually what's natural to, especially to people like us.
Mm-hmm.
That's our world. And there's so much, doesn't it give so much more than the here and now, the dense reality, or the dense place that we live in. This is what's exciting, is all the other levels and intuition and our spirit guides and all the other dimensions. Don't you find that exciting?
Very. And that this is not the only dimension that exists and the only reality that
Yeah. Ooh.
exists.
Yeah. No, this is a very dense existence. So it's nice to connect with the other dimensions, especially when it comes to helping people, helping clients. As far as mediumship, I discovered that I'm a medium when I was going to the spiritualist church in Massachusetts. And, we would sit in a circle and just listen, and wait for someone to come through who had a message for someone in the circle. So that was when I first discovered it. I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago. Um, I love doing mediumship, when it presents itself, because it's just, again, helping the person who's sitting in front of me, as you know. And I have brought a lot of relief, clarity, and comfort to clients who have come to me for mediumship readings, and especially closure. You know, if someone died unexpectedly and the reason was not understood, to be able to share what happened is what, brings them closure. I can give you an example if you
I
like.
love examples.
Yeah. A young woman came to me for a mediumship session with her brother who had uh, died I think it was like 4 years earlier. And she was very close to him. This is a Cape Verdean family, and she wanted to know what had happened. He had drowned, and no one knew what happened, and so it sort of tore the family apart. People just shut down, didn't communicate, went their own ways. And this is what grief does. It causes people to shut down and often not communicate, and 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 suffer. So anyway, I'm sitting with her in my office in Buzzards Bay, and uh, I said, "Are you ready to connect with your brother?" And she said yes. And all of a sudden, he showed up, and I can still see him now, even though this was so long ago. And I was able to describe what he was wearing, and that, as you know, but some of the audience might not know, that's part of evidential mediumship, is when we provide clues, how they looked, how they dressed, how they talked, things, specific things they might have said that only the person who I'm doing the reading for would know. So he showed up. He was wearing a white t-shirt, he's wearing jeans, um, and very handsome, probably around 15 years old. And he said, I would like my sister to know what happened. I said, that's great. That's why we're here. And so basically, he shared the story of what happened that day, which was that he and a couple of friends were, it was a summer day. They wanted to go swimming, and so they swam across a small lake together, and then they were on their way back, and the other two boys were doing fine, but the brother got a cramp in his leg. And so one of the other boys said, I'm going to stay with you. What are you okay? And he said, the brother said, no, you go ahead. I'll be okay. And so they went ahead, and uh, he ended up drowning. So he wanted his sister to know, when we were meeting together, that he was okay, he was in a good place, and that he was concerned about her and the rest of her family, and that it was really important to him for her to let them know what I had shared about what happened, so that they could have closure. And she had closure from that. There's more that we talked about, but that was those were the most important points of the session, is for her to understand what happened to her brother, and to know that he was doing fine. It brought closure.
Right. Yeah. When you can get that closure of everybody's been wondering, and now we know the answer so we can rest. That's the point of mediumship, isn't it?
Yes, to provide relief and comfort and clarity and understanding. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I'm sure, there's one of my favorite things to say to myself is, there's a reason, there's always a reason for everything. We just might not be privy to it in the moment.
Yeah.
But you just reminded me of another situation, which is I had just published my book, Hitching a Ride, a guide to um, who's around you, basically. Uh, and anyway, I was back on Cape Cod, and a woman that was extremely gifted and brilliant. Uh, she had been a medical doctor. Anyway, she was a friend of mine. She ended up uh, having a fight with her husband one night and went out on her bicycle. It was raining, and she got hit by a car and died. And the whole thing was very, very sudden. And so I offered to meet with the husband when I was in town and check in with her and see how she was doing. And it turns out that she was still earthbound. This is weeks later. And so what I did when I was sitting with him at their house at the kitchen table was I sent her to the light so that she could be free. And um, and that felt really good. And that's another thing that I do is uh, I can check and see if someone has made it to the light or if they've gotten stuck here. And that's a lot of what my book is about. Hitching a Ride is, how souls get stuck here. And um, it's probably about 17 years worth of case studies of souls that I worked with that I did send back to the light. And, some of them attach to people because they feel stuck. And if they attach to a person and then, if they go inside their body, which they can do because they're pure energy when they leave their body, right? So if they can go inside of a person's body, it's the next best thing to being alive again because they can eat, they can drink, they can, have sex, they can, you know, be human, maybe even smoke again. If they used to smoke and the person they attach to, they can pick who they want to attach to. If the person, so if they were a smoker, the natural thing is, they'll find someone who smokes so they can experience that again. So that's been a big part of that's been the other branch of my work is identifying, talking with, and then sending earthbound spirits back home so that they can progress on their journey as a soul.
Why do some souls get stuck?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question because, well, one reason is if if they grew up with a very in a religious household, say Catholic is pretty common. Um, they grew up with a lot of fear and about being bad, a lot of shaming and fear of going to hell because they're told they're going to go to hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
For whatever they did or didn't do. And so when the person dies, if that was their experience, then they're going to be afraid to move on, right? They're going to kind of dig their feet in, and they can choose to stay on the earth plane. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one way that souls get stuck. And another way is if the death is unexpected, unplanned, and uh, uh, it's sometimes the soul can go into a shock, and like say a car accident or a sudden heart attack, and the soul becomes confused. There was no time to prepare, say like someone with cancer or another terminal illness. They have time to prepare to make their transition. But when it's a shocking, sudden, unanticipated death, um, the soul becomes confused and can get stuck here. Sometimes they don't even know that they've deceased.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
Yeah.
Finally, I would like to ask what I ask all of my guests, which is off the top of your head, without overthinking it, if there's one thing that you want people to know, what is it?
For anyone who's suffering, I can help, whether you're dealing with grief or a lifelong depression, a phobia, childhood issues that are still lingering. uh, I can help.
Thank
I like to
you.
free people. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think it's one of those superpowers we don't even know we have sometimes. I know that not everyone will be able to do what you do, for example, but we all have these spiritual quote unquote powers, which are really just natural abilities in a lot of our cases to communicate with the other side, to a degree, create our reality, to free ourselves from unnecessary pain. And it's beautiful to know that, as you said, there is a way out. And often, I think part of the problem is we tell ourselves there isn't a way out. This is just my lot in life. This is just the way my life is. I'm just unlucky. I had a friend say that to me the other day. Why do bad things always happen to me? And I said, stop saying that because you're creating that story. And he said, yeah, but it seems to be the case for me all the time. I said, that's because you're telling yourself that's always the
Ask
case for
her,
you.
ask her where it comes from. Ask her to do a little insightful digging and ask her what kind of messages was she given as a child.
Yeah.
That'll
Yep.
help her make the connection.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your experience with us today, Ellie. It's been so nice to get to know you. And again, we're going to have links to work with Ellie, to Ellie's books, Ellie's website, etc. below. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about anything coming up other than just, hey, come work with me?
um no, if we could give the website for people that are more verbal,
Yeah.
auditory learners. um that would be, you want to do that?
Yeah. Go ahead and go ahead. I actually often do that. I often say for the visually impaired, can you tell us what your website is?
Yes, it's phoenixrisinghealing.com, and it's Ellie Pichette.
Thank you, Ellie Bichette, for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Me too. Thanks, Shannon. I really enjoyed meeting with you.